Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the show that puts you, the listener, in the driver's seat because you are the content. The phone lines are open to be a part of the program. It's a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Give me a call. We'll have a conversation about your tech questions or business and tech questions. Linux advocate, above all else, small business owner, now host of the only radio show centered around you, the listener. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. My name is Noah Chalaya. So good evening to you guys. Delighted to be here with you. And we're going to jump right into it, jump right into the calls you guys are lining up. Happy to be here in our new studio. The guys at Multispeed Technologies have worked hard over the past couple months to build out a studio specifically for and tailored to the Ask Noah Show. So we hope you appreciate a little bit more polish. And we have a couple surprises for you coming up throughout the show. But before we get started, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't just take a few moments to acknowledge the tragedy that has occurred in Las Vegas, Nevada. So our thoughts and prayers are with the family of the victims. And Las Vegas is a big town, and they have a lot of medical centers, but they are not equipped to deal with the mass amount of casualties that they're suffering, and so they're hurting real bad out there. And you guys definitely have you're definitely in our thoughts and prayers. With that said, though, let's jump to Micah from Alabama. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, how's it going?
Excellent. How can we help?
I'm actually a multiple-time caller now. So I upgraded from Fedora 25 to Fedora 26, and it all seemed smooth. Of course, when I booted in for the first time, the resolution was really low and stuff like that. But it appeared that my graphics drivers were not running. I tried opening the NVIDIA settings. I have a GTX 1060, and so I couldn't figure out how to get them running. So I tried to do a fresh reboot of my computer after the fresh upgrade to 26, and I couldn't boot into anything. All of a sudden, my screen it appeared to be putting out some kind of an error message, but it looked like Braille, I guess, because it looked. I honestly don't know what happened, but not even the lettering from the boot up would show correctly. So what can I do here?
Well, so interestingly enough, you're not the first person to report an issue kind of like that. The first thing I have to ask is, have you tried booting with the no mode set inside of the bootloader?
Inside Grub?
Yes.
I have not.
So that might be one thing you can try. Here's the when you say that it looks really funny, does it look really funny from even at the bootloader screen, or does that seem to populate properly?
The bootloader comes up fine. It shows options even for 25, and I try to boot into that still, but it wouldn't work as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna say what I would try is I would try booting with no mode sets. Basically, what you're gonna do, Mike, if you're not familiar with that process, basically what you do is when you're sitting at Grub, instead of actually choosing a boot option, you're gonna press the E key. E is an echo, and that's going to let you edit the.
I'm sorry, the what key, sir?
E. E is an echo.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yep, and what that's going to let you do, that's going to let you edit the boot parameters, and basically there's going to be a lot of stuff. Doesn't necessarily matter if you understand all of it, but what you're looking for is, I always look for the word quiet, and that's usually there inside of that kernel string, and you can go to the very end of that, and add and put a space, and then add the words no mode set, all run together, all one word, and we'll have that in the show notes for you. That's my first thing to try anytime I have weird graphical things with Fedora. Now, just out of curiosity, you don't happen to know if this is the first time you've tried running Wayland?
Actually, that's a good question, because didn't that change from 25 to 26?
I don't know when it turned on by default. but I know that was a recent thing, and I also know that a couple of the times that we've seen issues with display things, it's been we just fall back to X. But of course, you have to be able to get into the graphical environment to begin with to to easily switch back to that. There's a way to do it from the CLI, but the easiest way to do that is is just at the login screen. But if that's not even loading properly, then you can't do that.
Right.
Yeah, so give no mode set a chance, and I will look up the exact details for how to change from Wayland back to X. We'll see if that doesn't fix your problem as well. Architect is calling from Texas. Hi, Architect. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah. Nice to be talking to you again. Just wanted to call in and give you a quick rundown on the GPD Pocket, since I know that you were interested in those UMPCs.
Yes, sir. Yes, I am. I'm very interested. You have one, huh?
Yeah, it took a while to get here, but the Ubuntu edition was pretty nice. Though, of course, me being me, I had to immediately try to put BSD on it. But the only odd things to note about the GPD Pocket is that the screen is mounted sideways, so you have to actually rotate it 90 degrees in X or in the console, depending on how you like to use your devices. And the Wi-Fi, I believe, is probably like a Broadcom chipset because it's not picked up by default. Unlike, Intel or Atheros chipsets would be. Only other real thing of note was that the internal eMMC is very slow to image with a ZFS pool, but after that it works fantastic.
Okay, so when you ordered yours actually came preloaded with Ubuntu, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so so then you wiped off Ubuntu and you loaded PCBSD?
Kind of. I loaded hardened BSD.
I see.
I'm really getting interested into the security enhancements.
Okay, yeah, sure. And so you said the only thing is that you have to rotate the screen, huh? So I mean that's really interesting. So how is the battery life?
It doesn't seem to be reporting properly through ACPI, so I can't get a good estimate on battery time, because I also haven't been able to wear it down in any standard settings where I've actually been able to time it.
Okay.
So it should last you a full day if you're not doing anything too terribly graphically expensive on it, or compiling kernels all day.
Gotcha. And what kind of things have you actually been able to do on the device? So, like for example, are you able to watch video, stream video, watch Netflix, edit graphics, all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, I mean it's a standard Intel iGPU and just an Atom chipset, so it's not the fastest thing out there, but it's very capable of doing whatever you need once you get that screen rotation fixed.
Your opinion, it was worth the money?
I can't remember exactly how much I paid for it, but yeah, it's a pretty great buy.
Fantastic.
There's not many other laptops that you can actually shove in your pocket.
No, there's not, and and this is coming from the days of the Toshiba Libretto, and of course the the Palm Pilot days and stuff, where we had computers that fully functional computers. Not in the case of the Palm Pilot, but definitely in the case of the Libretto. I miss that. I really do. It was really fantastic. So thank you very much for calling in to let me know about that. That's still on my purchase list. There's few things that I'm 100% sure I'm going to own one day, but that is definitely one of them, as soon as time and budgetary constraints allow. Hey guys, have you noticed how great those phone calls sound? Those last two, you listen to the past couple episodes and then listen to those two phone calls and how great those sounds. You know why? We have a brand new talk show system here in a brand new studio that was graciously donated by Voxtelsis. Voxtelsis is our recommendation at Altispeed Technologies if you're ever looking for SIP trunking, or phone service. And so if you like the crystal clear quality that you're hearing on the air today, thanks to Voxtelsis, check them out at voxtelsis.com. We'll have a link in the show notes. All right, I want to take you back 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. I was I started Altispeed Technologies. We were working on doing structured networking and all of this stuff. And eventually the structured networking structured wiring and managed networking eventually led us to start doing, different kinds of cabling. So we'd have these, fraternities that would say, well, we want you to come put in, a PA system. And so we had one of those installs. And so we went out there and I sent the installers out and they went and put a PA system in for these guys. And they were having a dance that Friday night and Saturday, I think it was. And Friday night, the installers showed, earlier that week, they installed the PA system, give them a rundown on how to use it. Friday night, they have this dance, and somebody dumps beer inside of this 4,000-watt Crown amplifier and blew the thing up. And they called us on Saturday. They said, we're in a real hurt because we need to get this thing fixed, and somebody dumped beer into it, and it doesn't work anymore, and we don't know what to do. And we said, well, there's no real way that we can get that fixed. I mean, we can probably get it fixed, but we can't get it fixed tonight. And certainly it's not going to be covered under any type of warranty. So you guys are just kind of out if you end up needing to buy a new amp. And they said, well, what are we going to do? Because we have this other party that's happening tonight. And I said, well, we have a rental amp that I will let you use. However, given what the demise that became your first amplifier, the only way that I'm going to let you use it is if you pay one of our technicians to be there to operate the thing so we can make sure that you raging alcoholics stay away from the, the sensitive electronics. They said, oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that'd be great. So without a lot of training, we sent one of our techs that was, he was there as an installer to, install this stuff and walk people through it. But because of that, he had some basic training on audio knowledge and kind of how to connect the thing up because he was showing them how to use it. So he goes out to this fraternity, and he hooks up a laptop that we sent him out with, and he just, I think he was just using a VLC, and he was playing different music tracks, and we had downloaded some of them off of Amazon, and turned out it was really successful, and it was actually really nice for them having somebody who properly knew how to adjust levels and all of that stuff. So the next, about 3 weeks later, they called us and they said, yeah, we got the amplifier back and we're really happy with it and everything's working great, but could we just hire you guys to start coming out and doing these parties for us? And so pretty much for the next couple of months, once a month, we would go out there and we would host these parties for these guys. And then they started talking to some of the sororities and they said, we have these guys, they're coming out and they're hosting and they're playing this music for us. And by this time, I think we had downloaded Mix, which is a free open source DJ software. And we were running it inside of this fraternity, and they had recommended that the sororities also hire us. So we'd gotten hired by a couple of them, and we'd come and done some of their events. And then the college system, they have this event where both, a fraternity and a sorority, they both come together and they have this little formal dance thing. And they said, would you come do that? And so we start doing those events, and pretty soon, before we know it, like within a year or so, pretty much every week we've got an event booked. Now, this is all run on consumer-grade hardware, second-hand consumer-grade hardware, just spare laptop that we had sitting around, spare amp that we had that we were using for rental and PA stuff. And, eventually, the guy that was doing this was like, we really should buckle down. I mean, we're doing so many of these, we should actually go buy some equipment, actually do this right. So we went down to the local music store, and I said, we don't have I don't know what this is going to bring monetary-wise. I don't know how long this gravy train is going to last, but we need some equipment. And so I explained the situation to the guy at the music store, and he goes, I have these 8-can lights, traditional incandescent lights, and I will sell the whole thing to you with the Gator rolling case for $100. And we said, yeah, sure. Yeah, great. That would be fantastic. So we bought the thing for $100, and we beef up this laptop that we were using, the secondhand laptop. And now we had a proper, or at least proper enough, music laptop, and we had these 8 incandescent lights. We bought a DMX dimmer pack off of Amazon.com, had it overnight shipped to us. And if you're not familiar with what DMX is a protocol that allows you to remotely basically control and time turning power on and off and set the amount of power that goes to these lights. That's a very crass way of explaining it. But so we buy this $50 dimmer pack, we hook these lights up to it. And now this dimmer pack, we can automate these lights flashing. So they're all flashing, and so that added a little pizzazz to these events. And as time went on, we start doing weddings, and we start doing, all these outdoor music festivals and things, especially rural parts of the state, where they didn't have anyone. There weren't DJs willing to come out there, at least not at a reasonable price, and we were. And so we just kind of built the thing up. And eventually, what we ended up doing was we found that there was a program called QLite Plus, QLC Plus, that could very specifically program these lights and make them do very specific things. I could make them go a specific color. I could make them flash. I could make them go completely out. I could make patterns. All of these different things. And then we eventually added a fog machine, and pretty soon the thing grew. And today, 2017, the most profitable venture that Altispeed has ever done, and don't get me wrong, the majority of our income still comes from IT services by a long shot, but money that we have actually invested, money that we pay the people to do this stuff versus the amount of money that we take in, so the cost to expense ratio, the cost to profit ratio, nothing has been as wide of a spread at Altispeed Technologies in 2017 as our events business. Now, because of that, and because the event world is filled with newer flashy lights, newer fog machines, newer automation, and it's one of those things that I think that Linux does exceptionally well. There's a lot of things that you can shoehorn Linux into doing. There's a lot of things that just don't matter what operating system you're doing. And then there's some things that Linux just does so much better than the alternative operating systems that even somebody who has no bias at all, and I fully admit to having bias when it comes to desktop operating systems, even somebody that has no bias at all would choose Linux if they saw what Linux was doing as compared to the alternatives on macOS and Windows. And one of the gentlemen that I have been talking about toys and talking about ways to do these different things is Eric. Now, Eric joined us a couple weeks ago to talk about a new business that he's starting doing IT consulting. But what Eric has already been successful at and made a name for himself is doing lights and sound. So welcome back to the program for the second time, Eric from Kansas City. How are you?
How you doing, Noah?
Hey, pretty good. So I want to start with this. How did you, I just kind of got through my story on how I kind of got, into this world. You are kind of cut from the same cloth in that you're also doing IT stuff, and yet somehow you're also wound up in the DJ world. Tell me the story.
Well, I actually got into IT and lighting the opposite way that you did. I had my full-time IT career and as a Linux systems engineer, but at my church on the weekends, I was kind of helping them get set up with a couple of computers, some check-in kiosks, and that kind of thing. And our worship pastor came to me and said, "Hey, it's getting close to Christmas time, and some of our folks are burnt out." And it was a portable church. It was a church in a box, essentially.
Oh, interesting.
We had a bunch of road cases and a trailer and a middle school gym. So every Sunday morning at 6 a.m., we'd unload the trailers and set up every cable, every light, every speaker, every microphone. And then about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when we were done with services, we tear it all back down and do it week in and week out. So as you can imagine, burnout was pretty high. And so our worship pastor asked if I would mind helping out, was her exact word.
We've all heard that.
I'm smart enough to I'm smart enough to run some cables. Just tell me where. And so I shadowed the audio team and the video team and ran camera a couple of times. And the lighting designer and I did my weekend to shadow, because they wanted me to shadow each team and kind of get an idea of what the production team did. And he happens to be a specialized software developer. So he was able to correlate lighting technology into IT technology, which I already understood. And DMX, the lighting protocol, the predominant lighting protocol, is nothing but a dumb network packet, essentially. And so he was able to equate terms and ideas in lighting to IT. So he and I hit it off, and I really hit it off with lighting. And being a logically driven person, I understood the technology. But there's another part of me that I discovered that was more creatively driven. And so it's been this beautiful marriage between being a music junkie and understanding technology that I got into doing lights on a regular basis. I became the senior lighting designer for that church, and and more recently another church, and when your church doesn't exist but for a few hours on a weekend, it's hard to get in and play with the technology and learn and tear things apart and put it back together.
Oh, absolutely.
I tried. I realized that there was other ways I could do this, and so I met a few different bands, and one of them was looking for a lighting guy, and so they usually bought my dinner, and if it was a big enough show, paid me a little bit of money to come in and run lights for them. And I just fell in love with this, just the music and creating environments for people and eliciting emotion and songs. I mean, it was a lot of fun to do. And so after a summer with this band, I really realized that, there's a real need here. I mean, Kansas City is one of the fastest growing music venues in all of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so my now wife and I decided to start a lighting business, and we started marketing to bands and venues, and now that was 4 years ago this week, actually. And,
wow.
And now here we are 4 years later, and we've got a good client base, and we've got a good name across town, and we're loving every minute of it.
Fantastic! That's outstanding, man. That is a great story. Yeah, and the thing is that they don't tell you when you get into this stuff is everyone they're like, I can play music. It's not the playing music. That's the easy part. That's the easy. What's hard is when it's 2 a.m. and people have consumed a lot of intoxicating beverages and you have not, and so you're of sound mind, and this person comes up. Like I literally have. We were doing an outdoor venue thing, music thing, and this lady literally comes up to me completely plastered and goes, "Can you play that red redneck song?" And I knew what she was talking about because I listened to that, because I listened to the music, right? And you have to, like you said, you have to be a music junkie first. And if you're going to start playing with DMX, man, you have to understand and love troubleshooting, because once you get the hang of it, it's not so bad. But for anyone that's not played with DMX, essentially, there are 10 dip switches, and it's binary code, and so that's basically what it is. That is what it is, not basically. That is what it is. And so you give an address in binary code using these 10 dip switches to every different light. And of course, if you have a light that has a red light and a blue light, and a green light, and then also has dip various intensities from 0 to 255 or whatever. Each one of those is a channel value, and so you can't just say, well, the first light is 1 and the second one is 2, and no, it's the first one is 1 and the second one is like 7 and the next one is like 13, because it depends on how many channels are in each one of it becomes ridiculously confusing, ridiculously fast. Tell me this, I have gone very heavily software based, like everything that we're doing is software based. Now you're using a lot of very purpose-built hardware controllers. Tell me about that.
Right. I also started out on DMX's and its bigger brother D Pro,
mm-hmm.
and I've used Chauvet Show Express, and a lot of those aren't open source or anything, but
they work.
I have used them in the past, and what really struck me was that you're dependent upon the reliability of the computer running underneath it, whether that's Windows or Mac. And there's nothing worse than, I've had this happen on both platforms, on either Mac or on Windows, where the system decides to update, or the Windows start menu crashes or something, and all of a sudden you don't have control of any of your lights in the middle of a big dance number.
Yeah.
So it was.
I'll pause to tell you I have not experienced that, and I run everything on Linux. But I will tell you a funny story when you finish. Where the same thing happened.
Okay. So after that happened a couple of times, and just the fact that being able to have a physical interface to actually feel.
Yes.
When you're pushing a fader up, you can actually feel the intensity increasing on your lights.
Right.
It's just so much easier to kind of feel your rig.
Mm-hmm.
And to pretty much all the big tours and everything run off of physical dedicated consoles.
Right.
So I about this time I was starting to fall in love with Linux as more than just a server environment. So that was kind of a factor. And I came across High-End Systems. They are a lighting and control manufacturer that focuses on lights and controllers and cables and that sort of thing. And they're kind of the entry level professional grade console out there, because you can get consoles for the meager $12,000 a piece, or you can get crazy and buy the ones for $60,000.
Yeah,
but
chump
when you're
change.
a poor startup.
Yeah, right.
You need to get in somehow. And so the High-End Systems Hedgehog 4 was kind of the answer. It was about $6,000. It controls 2 universes, so that's 2,048 channels or so, and gives you the ability to have 10 faders, four spinning knobs, and from there.
I tell you what, I'll give you a second there to get your smoke detector working there. I'll tell you, I'll just share a funny story while we're waiting for him to come back. But basically, it was interesting. So we were doing a show. It was a wedding, actually. It was somebody's wedding, and we went on site, and the bride and the groom, they insisted on having fog, and you try not to do fog inside of public venues because it makes everyone really nervous and it makes a lot of people upset. And particularly the fire marshal. And so we contacted the fire department. We said, this is just part of the package. It's just something they got to have, and so we just got to do it. And they said, okay, you can do fog. However, because to do fog, I should back up and explain. To do fog, we have to shut the alarm system down, or the smoke alarm system will continually go off. So we contacted the fire department. We explained what we want to do. They said, you can shut the fire system down. However, during the time that it's shut down, you have to designate a person. And by designate, we don't mean like, oh, Joe, keep an eye in case there's something. No, somebody has to be on staff, and that person needs to walk around the entire time during the event and ensure that there is no fire, there's no fire hazards. Said, okay, so we actually, not one, but 2. We hired 2 people, had them on staff the entire time, and they walked around and did all this stuff. So the shutdown procedure was this ridiculously complicated, push these buttons, select these zones, push this thing, whatever. And I have better things to do with my day than learn how to operate fire control systems that we're going to do once for this, event. So I'm there to shake hands and say, I don't know, to speed, nice to meet you. But the reality was I wasn't particularly invested in this, in this event. And our director of operations was there, and he was kind of spearheading the whole thing. And so he sat down with we had the fire alarm system company come in. They showed us how to shut all this stuff down, and he was the one that had gone through it with him. So I sent him back. I said, go shut the fire alarm system down. We're going to test this. So we're testing all this stuff. Okay, everything works. Shut it down for the night. We're good. The fog machine, and Eric, I don't know if you're back with us now. The fog machine was on channel 1. It was the very first channel of the DMX chain. And what nobody told me about DMX is, again, I'm not usually the one that plugs all this stuff in or sets this stuff up. What nobody told me about it is the last value that is sent to the universe. If the DMX controller becomes disconnected from the laptop, the computer then loses track of where things have been. And if you shut the software down, it doesn't realize that, whatever channels are on and what channels are off. So it just assumes everything is at the off state. I inadvertently, somehow, we still haven't exactly figured out what happened, but somehow I unplugged the USB controller, and that somehow, before that happened, had turned all of the channels on and up to full blast, and fog comes pouring out of this commercial grade industrial fogger into the venue, just and so I immediately freak out. I run to the front desk, and there's people in the event lobby and stuff like that, and I'm sat in the back, and I'm on the phone with my director of operations, and I'm like, please answer. How do I shut the alarm off? And he's walking me through, press this zone, press this thing, do that, and I'm hitting it. I'm just waiting for the whole thing to go out and this whole venue to be evacuated because I unplugged a USB cable. So all that to say, I understand exactly what you're talking about when you say, if it's running on a physical piece of hardware, if it's running on a dedicated controller, something that's built from the ground up and cost a lot of money to do it well, that's always a That's always the preference, and that's kind of what you're getting with this Hog 4, right?
Right. And first off, sorry, my wife's cooking, and our Nest alarm system doesn't typically like her cooking for some reason. But I've had that very same issue, and it could have been some sort of a highlight function, or a macro that went haywire. I mean, it could be any number of things, and that's not something you're immune to with a dedicated console. But with the Hedgehog 4, one of the nice things is that it's a dedicated Linux kernel. Granted, it's stripped down, and only the absolute essentials are running on it. But it is a Linux kernel, and they've got their software running on the top, and it's basically a GUI interface to abstract the 255 point values of the 1,024 channels or whatever that you may be running. And so I've seen a lot more stability. I've seen a lot better. The effects engine is a lot better. So when you're doing a pan chase across the audience, you can have more fine control over it than I've had luck with software installs on Mac or Windows or Linux. And there's also, in the industry, there's definitely a coolness value that you have to take into account with your business. And having a dedicated hardware console has definitely opened up some doors that otherwise wouldn't be possible.
Sure, yeah. You look like a lighting guy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so tell me about this, Eric. I understand that out of all the people that they could have picked to design this NHL lighting system, turns out they picked you and your company. Tell me about that. That's got to be exciting.
Well, it's definitely helpful to have some history and a good reputation, because what happened was one of the big production companies here in town that handles all the big events was short on guys last week. All their lighting designers were out on other events, so they called one of the other companies here in town, who also didn't have anyone available for last week. And but I happen to freelance with them several times a year. There's events like there's an Irish Fest, there's a Plaza Art Fair, big stages with tons of local and regional talent. And so, people don't need to necessarily staff full-time lighting guys for the 5 or 6 weekends where they do these festivals. So they lean heavily on freelancers, and that's more or less how I got my start. So the second company actually called me and said, "Hey, are you available?" And so they gave me a referral, and so last Thursday, I was actually at Sprint Center here in downtown Kansas City, running a small lighting package for a St. Louis Blues National Hockey League game.
Wow. Cool.
That was definitely my largest venue, and it was a lot of fun to get to walk around behind the scenes and get to listen on the comms as the video director was calling out different shots and making all the lights go crazy when somebody would score. It was a really exciting experience.
Oh, that's fantastic, Matt. Well, I'm glad things are taking off for you, not only just in the Linux IT consulting world, but also in the lighting world, and you are definitely a pleasure to talk to. And we at the Ask Noah Show wish you all the best of luck, and thank you so much for taking the time to come with us and share your story.
Definitely, I appreciate it.
People want to find out more about your Linux-powered hardware and your IT services, or both. Where can they go?
The IT consulting business is at IT Guys KC, and then the lighting business is at Belight KC, BELIGHT KC. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and both of those businesses have websites as well.
Outstanding. Thanks so much, Eric. We really appreciate having you on the show. One quick point I want to make before we move on is we're talking about embedded systems and the differences between embedded systems and computer systems. I want to point something out. So he's talking about how there is a Linux kernel on this embedded system. And what you find, and I've seen this over and over and over in industry, and it's been kind of interesting to try to square this with what I see in the community side of Linux. You find these companies like this, very expensive $6,000 lighting controller, and it runs a dedicated Linux kernel, and everyone pretty much accepts that that is a very stable system. Do you know how they got that stable system? They took the very minimum part of the Linux operating system necessary to run, they stuck it in this device, they stripped out all of the external variables so that it's only running one piece of software, and the only updates they ever provide to this box are the updates that have been carefully screened and tested over and over and over by a team before being released to, this thing. So I promise you the kernel in that thing is old by our standards, okay? And what you achieve from that is ultimate reliability. And then we have all these goobers that are out there that go and take these systems and they not only just install the base operating system, but they install every package under the sun, and they make every tweak under the sun known to man. And then they, they goof with the themes and they goof with the everything. They monkey with it, and then they go, wow, this just turns out Linux just isn't really that stable. It's just, it crashed on me. This thing crashed. Well, yeah, because you monkeyed with it. You screwed with it. And there is no possible way that every software every software developer can work with every other software developer to make sure that everything works perfectly, unless that's been in a tested environment. So you have to choose. Do you want to be on the bleeding edge and play with everything that's the latest and greatest, or we call lag syndrome around here? Do you want to do that? Or do you want ultimate reliability? And if you want ultimate reliability, you take one machine and you give it one task and let it do that one task very, very well. Or if you're going to have you do multiple things, make sure that you have thoroughly tested those multiple things so that we know that all of those things work. Anyway, sorry, I got off a little bit on a rant, but that is just one of those things that, as Eric was talking, I was kind of, the gears were turning in the back of my mind, and I'm like, I have seen this play out, and I think it's something that's really interesting. I am going to butcher your name, my friend, and I am so sorry. Is it Skicken from Tucson, Arizona?
It's Chicken. It's
Chicken.
Oddly spelled.
Okay, tell me about that. I gotta ask. Tell me about that. What heritage is that?
Oh, it's not. It's just my handle. It's actually a really lame sort of story.
Okay, well, no worries. Okay, well, welcome to the Ask Noah Show. How can we help?
Thank you. I had some curiosity point. I was wondering what your favorite part in regards to cross-project collaboration was in New York City at the Ubuntu Rally.
Yes. Great question. So for those of you who don't know, last week we were live from New York City, New York, and we were attending the Ubuntu Rally. The Ubuntu Rally is essentially a conference, but it's a conference for Canonical employees. So they all meet together and they talk, and they bring in outside people. So the people from Dell were there, and people from Microsoft were there, people from the Skype project, from the .NET team, people from Electron were there, and basically the idea was, how can we fix some of these things, and can we get these people in the same room so that when I just got a message on my Linux machine that said that the version of Skype I was using was out of date. And I know for a fact that the Skype team was meeting with the people from the Snap team so that we could make a snap of Skype, so that I don't have that problem anymore. And the only way that actually happens, right, is if either Microsoft brings people from Canonical in that know everything there is to know about snaps, or if Canonical brings people from Microsoft, the people who know everything about Skype. And in this particular case, it was Canonical that extended the first hand to all of these people and brought them all in. What was my favorite part? My favorite part, I guess, was I was privy to some very interesting discussion. And the discussion, there was concrete discussion of things that are happening in Canonical that proved to me without a shadow of a doubt that Canonical is taking the desktop Linux ecosystem more seriously than ever before. They are doubling down on their effort to bring a world-class desktop operating system to their users, and they are going about it in a transparent and open way that we haven't seen from any company really in 15 years. I mean, it is mind-blowingly amazing. Their insight and their foresight and their ability to plan, and they have anticipated all of these problems and already come up with solutions. They are solving problems 5 years down the road that you and I haven't even thought of. And it was only because I was able to sit in that room and listen to them talk about where we are today, where we're going to be in 3 years, what problems we're going to have in 3 years, and how they're going to solve those before we ever hit 5 years. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. I would say that sort of...
That is fascinating.
It was. And, the other thing is, too, and I was just talking to Chris about this earlier today, we have a unique opportunity as trusted... because not a lot of people were invited to this event. It was they hand-selected some carefully selected media people who they knew would respect the privacy if asked to, who would stay out of the way from these people actually trying to get work done, but at the same time would shed some light on what it is Canonical is doing and how they're doing it to better the community. And we got done, and we have an interview that's going to play later in the show. Chris has done a fantastic job of collecting video footage that he's going to publish in his video weblog. And the problem is that neither of us are real confident in what the reception is going to be. A lot of, we're talking about it, and, the thing is, the community reacts a lot stronger to negative conversation. If we went there, or we went anywhere really, and said, these people are doing a terrible job and here's why, everyone would like that video, everyone would share that video, everyone would talk about that video. But when we go to these places and we say, man, these people, they are knocking it out of the park. They are doing such a fantastic job. And they are doing they are fixing so many problems and collaborating in such great ways. And the reality is that both him and I have this, thing in the back of our minds that says nobody's going to really care. Nobody's going to really care that really great, cool things are happening because it's not drama. And that's kind of disappointing. So I guess...
That's rough.
It is. But you know what? Everyone that's listening to the show right now has an opportunity to prove both him and I wrong. Take a look at his video weblog and make sure to call it a video weblog. Write that all out because it drives him nuts. He gave me a hard time because I think I called it a vlog, and he's like, oh, vlog, it's vlog. And I'm like, okay, fine. You want to expand it out? It's a video weblog. So make sure to call it a video weblog. But share that and tweet it and talk about it and learn from what it is that we experienced there, and encourage other people in the media and encourage other companies to have positive interactions and make big changes. Because I'm telling you guys, I was there for 3 days, and in 3 days, I saw more collaboration and more planning and more answers to problems that we, as desktop Linux users, are suffering from right now. They were solving those problems while we were there. And I think that, I really think that that needs to be met with a positive attitude. And if it's not, then there's not a lot of incentive for those companies to continue doing things like that, and there's not a lot of incentive for us to cover it. Man, the names this hour. Abuti from Idaho? Am I saying that right? I hear an echo.
Oh.
Hi.
Hey.
Am I saying your name right, or is that a screen name?
No, that's just. Don't worry about it. I've called him before, Anyhow, I'm just wondering if Blu-ray is a thing yet in Linux.
Oh yeah, Blu-ray is definitely a thing. In fact, I have my favorite Blu-ray drive is the LG drive. I have two of them. I have one that's a USB one and one that's a PC or a SATA drive. And both of them work fantastic. I've ripped Blu-rays using Rosario. I've ripped Blu-rays using K3B, and I ripped Blu-rays using Make MKV. So yeah, no, Blu-rays definitely work great in Linux. Thanks for the call. We appreciate it. Chaz is calling from New York. Hey, Chaz from Northern New York. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah. I'm glad you got back safe to good old Grand Forks.
Yes, sir. How can we help?
Well, I had a question for you. This actually goes back to 2 user errors ago, but I didn't want to call in last week because I didn't want to disrupt coverage of the rally. There was an ask error about the Linux technology that you were most interested never really went anywhere, and there was talk of Steam machines. Now, I've always thought that Linux missed a big opportunity during the Windows 8 debacle to supplant Windows as the primary gaming operating system. So I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts on that are. Did they miss an opportunity? Do you think that they ever have an opportunity to become, big in the gaming space again? And what needs to happen to get more than just, the Half-Life 2 and Portal 2 and Valve games on Linux?
I definitely think they missed an opportunity. I'm not always convinced that it's necessarily their fault. Here's the problem. The part of the problem is that they are somewhat dependent on the game manufacturers, right? And so if the game manufacturers don't port their games, then Valve doesn't really have a lot of say in it. But here is the advantage had they pushed harder on this whole Steam Machine thing. They could have very easily competed in the console world. I have a lot of friends that are in the console world, and inside of that world, Xbox kind of reigns king, and then PlayStation 2 is under that, and then everything else is kind of below that. Unless you're like a retro game person, then you probably are big into the Wii because you can still play Mario. But the Xbox, a lot of the games that are on Xbox, a lot of the A1 titles are also played on PC. And so if Steam would have been able to successfully convince these game manufacturers to start pulling their games over into, Steam OS, and now Valve could sell these Steam boxes or partner with Dell and all the other hardware places that could sell these, game consoles, it would not only would you begin to compete with the Xbox market, but you would also exist in a market that nobody has existed in before, and that is the gaming by convenience. So, for example, I am never going to buy a game console because I don't care. I just don't have time to play games. That said, if I could have a very powerful box to replace my NVIDIA Shield that could do all the things that the NVIDIA Shield did, except also it could play, Counter-Strike and stuff like that, heck yeah, I'd buy one of those. So I do think they kind of missed the ball. I don't think that the ship is entirely sailed yet. I think if they decided to jump on that horse, they could pretty much compete any time they wanted to jump back in. But I think it seems pretty clear that doesn't seem to be something they are pursuing. Although it doesn't seem like Steam for Linux has dropped any support lately. So, I mean, that's good. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's pretty much on point with what I've always thought, it being kind of the penguin and the egg in terms of games versus market for games. And I was just thinking the other day how if I could have just a PC that ran SteamOS and played all the games I wanted and could watch, the few Blu-ray movies that I have left, that would be the ultimate. But they got some work to do before that gets to that point.
Yeah, boy, you're telling me. Well, I hope they figure it out. I was really a fan of the Steam box, and I really would have looked forward to actually owning one of those, but maybe someday. Chris is calling from North Carolina. Hey, Chris, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah.
Hey, how can we help?
Yeah, so I work at a local sheriff's office here in North Carolina, and I got an idea of sharing some information between different divisions here at the sheriff's office and maybe some other agencies around.
Okay.
And what I wanted to know from you is a suggestion for a digital signage solution that I could control locally, either software or over the web.
Yeah.
And what that kind of setup would look like if you was to do it.
Yeah, sure. Those are the kind of things where I really think things like Raspberry Pis fit in perfectly. And there's actually a project called Screenly. It's screenly.io, and I'll have a link for you in the show notes. But basically, you flash the image onto a Raspberry Pi, and for $35, you can stick these boxes on a bunch of different computers and have them available and display digital signage. How's that for an answer?
That's a great answer. That's what I was actually looking at was the Raspberry Pis. But is there a software solution out there that you're aware of that works really good for Raspberry Pis?
Yeah, the software is called Screenly, and I will have a link for you in the show notes. But basically, it's just an image that you flash onto the Raspberry Pi, and then you can update. I do want to tell you though, as far as managing locally, keep in mind I'm here with Jerry Boland.
Whoa.
Okay, there we go. The one of the things to keep in mind is that the advantage of digital signage is that you can manage it from one place, and then all of them, update and display. All right, I want to play an interview from when we were out at the Ubuntu Rally. I'm here with Jerry Boland, and we are talking about Mir today. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Thanks very much. So I guess a little historical is good to know. Mir started off, I guess, when Wayland hadn't progressed a lot in the open source world. It existed a long time as a project, but no desktop had really embraced it fully. There were initial plans to adopt it as the Linux Desktop Foundation, but nothing ever really happened for a long time. Intel were pushing it, but not a lot. We didn't see much momentum. So we were considering, should we contribute to Wayland, or maybe we should do our own thing? What are the advantages and disadvantages of Wayland? And we found there were a couple of issues with Wayland that we were not terribly happy about. The fact that it's just a basic protocol, like it's a bunch of XML specs, that's frustrating because most application developers and most shell developers want an API to work with. That might be stable, as opposed to a protocol that can move around, and maybe it'll be versioned, and then maybe there'll be differences between, well, this application has these extensions to the protocol, this shell doesn't support those, what happens next? And it becomes a little bit messy. So the idea of Mir was we will deliver APIs to application toolkit developers and shell developers, and then we'll worry about everything in between. Of course, we will do all the things that a display server does, so we will work with the hardware. So we intended it to work on as much display hardware as possible, so it would work on all the Linux drivers, and it will also work on the Android-based stuff as well. So that was the foundation for the Ubuntu phone. We needed to work with all the Android-based drivers. And then all the inputs, need to get the inputs working, so touchscreens, mouse, joysticks, all those bits and pieces. And then there's a lot of other important little bits and pieces that have to just be done. And we were always frustrated that Wayland was just a protocol. If you actually wanted to bring something up, you had to write all the hard code yourself. You had to work with DRI, KMS. You had to figure out libinput didn't exist when we started either. So you had to talk to all these bits and pieces and figure it all out yourself, and that's an awful lot of work. So today, we've seen that Mutter, the GNOME project, has done very well. They have done all this work themselves. KWin as well has done that. It's taken them many years, but now it's in a great place. The Ubuntu phone didn't work out, unfortunately, and that caused us to reevaluate the value of Mir. There was just too much of a great tide supporting Wayland on the desktop, so it wasn't worth our while really pursuing that. That caused us to de-scope Mir quite a lot, but Mir still has advantages. The fact that it still works well on Android and Linux is useful. The fact it's quite lightweight, it doesn't assume a toolkit, it's pure C++, that's quite valuable. But there were issues with it still. The fact that it doesn't support the Wayland protocol is the big one. So we've recently announced that we're adapting Mir to implement the Wayland protocol. So it will be a Wayland display server. So it will work with existing toolkits that have Wayland adoption built in. And we're slowly expanding that. It's still early days, but we're building it out. And so it should be comprehensive enough. But it'll still be a lightweight shell implementation for shell authors to adopt if they like. So for, as you were saying, lightweight desktops like XFCE, Mate, Budgie, they might prefer to use a lighter shell toolkit that we've built as opposed to the pre-existing ones, which are quite a bit larger, like the Mutter or the KWin. And so that's kind of one place that we envision Mir hopefully being useful still in the future. And then, of course, we care a lot about IoT with our Snappy story, and we're trying to embrace device manufacturers who want a user interface for their product. If they want a touch screen, or if they just want a little LCD screen that shows status, they're going to need something to drive their hardware. So Mir will slot in quite well there. And we have kind of designed Mir to kind of integrate well in the Snappy ecosystem. So there's a Mir Snap, you install that, and then you put your little application on top, and boom, that works.
And so the reason then to just not use Mir in GNOME is because GNOME is so heavily tied to Wayland?
Pretty much, yeah. And also the fact that the community had just said we're using Wayland on desktops. We can't go against that. We won't. So we decided, since we dropped Unity, to adopt the GNOME ecosystem again, and therefore we will adopt Wayland. So there was a bit of controversy over that. We weren't sure if Wayland was quite ready yet to be turned on. It took a lot of testing. There's so many different types of hardware that capabilities, does Wayland perfectly suit them? There's all these smaller issues like different input methods. Will they work different languages? Will their input keyboard stuff work? Accessibility features, are they there? There's all these little things that X has been doing in the background for years that Wayland is only still early adopting yet. They have like unstable protocols defined, but nothing has really been solidified. Each different shell implementation has different qualities of that implemented. Some bits are missing, some bits are not there. Some protocol extensions have been added on to kind of fill in those gaps. But we found that the GNOME implementation is probably the best one that we can take, and we're happy to embrace that and hopefully work with them and improve it.
So based on what you're telling me, and my understanding is that Wayland is going to ship default in 1710.
That's right.
Do you foresee any major problems, and what is going to be the answer if it turns out that that's really difficult? Is the answer to what?
Good question. I guess the reason that we're turning it on now, well, one of them, in my estimation, is that it's a good testing ground for it. So 1710 is not an LTS. We tend to get more devoted users adopting the non-LTS revisions because they want to get the newer stuff and they want to test it and see what it's like. So if we release it and then we get some negative feedback, then we may reconsider the decision to use Wayland for default for the LTS in 6 months after. There are issues that we are aware of. For instance, the NVIDIA proprietary driver with their EGL Streams stuff. Mutter has implemented support for that, but I don't think X Wayland has implemented support for that. I'm not sure. I'm being looked at as if I'm wrong, but maybe not. I'm not sure, but it remains a few open questions as to how many things Wayland can do exactly right. And we will only find that out by people using it in the real world, giving us feedback, and then we can make a decision from there. 1710
goes out with Wayland. If it doesn't work, what do we roll back to? Because X is being discontinued. We know that at that point, Wayland isn't. Well, I mean, it's over time. X is eventually going away. And at the moment, at that point, you would have data points to tell you that Wayland isn't ready, at least at scale for production. So where do we go from there?
Well, X is not being deprecated entirely. Like the long-term goal probably would be to deprecate X, but X is still around. There's still a lot of development on it, and it's not going away. And so we may have to revert back to X for the LTS. LTS, the main priority for us is that it's stable and solid, and then people can use it every day without having to worry about stability or functionality issues. So that may be an unfortunate choice, but we'll have to see. We're just going to release 1710 and hope for the best.
The Fedora team, obviously, they have a lot of Wayland users on GNOME, but by contrast, Canonical has, you're talking, hundreds of thousands of users? When we start talking about Canonical and Ubuntu proper, now we're talking millions and millions of users. So the data that you're going to have access to that's going to come in with the 1710 release is going to provide us more real-world data than we've probably ever had with the default desktop being Wayland. Talk about that and talk about how that's going to affect your decisions.
Right. Due to the fact, as you said, a huge number of users. The more users you have, probably the more exotic their requirements may be, or the more disparate they may be. That will be very valuable, because it's probably one of these, like 90% of people will be happy, but it's that 10%. But 10% of what number? 10% of 100,000? Not so big. 10% of 10 million? That's a lot more. That's a lot more than very exotic bugs coming in that are still important. And so we're going to have to address them, and we're going to have to figure out how many exotic issues are there. Can we fix them in time for the LTS, or maybe we can't? Maybe we'll have to wait until after the LTS to revisit the full Wayland-based desktop again. So it really is, the numbers, how much feedback we get, and how good or bad it is. It's going to be a waiting game. Time will tell us.
Outstanding. Well, thanks so much for your time. If people want to learn more about what's going on with Canonical, with Wayland, with Mir, what the cool things that Mir is doing to be an abstraction layer, are you personally where can they go?
Where should they go? Good question. Our IRC channel is usually one of the best places. Ubuntu Desktop and Freenode is one of the best places to find out what's going on. That's where all the hot news is popping up, and that's where we all chat and discuss. I'd recommend that as a good place.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thanks very much for having us.
And that's going to bring us right to the end of the program. But thanks so much for everyone for being here and joining me on the air. We appreciate it. Hope this sounded a little bit better than it has in the past. Before we get out of here, I want to thank Sarah, our call screener, Ben, our producer, and Rakai, our video editor. We'll hand you off to Crosspoint coming up next on KEQQ, Logos Radio 88.3, LPFM, Grand Forks.